welcome to today's episode of Sealcast. I'm joined today by Connor and Ryan. How are you two doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Doing all right.
Good. And today we're talking a little bit about just the women's game in general. Of course, we're going to be covering and working with Chester a bit this season, as you guys will know from the website. So that's going to be pretty exciting. But I just wanted to speak a bit about the women's game because to me it's crazy how fast it's developing. You've seen it compared to the men's game, and it's grown immensely. For me, I didn't not followed it too much. Certainly not compared to the men's game, obviously. But I don't know. You find yourself becoming more interested in it for sure. With the amount it's getting pushed now, I was just wondering, you two, what are your two opinions on it? Do you follow it much? Because for me, I didn't. I'm starting to a bit more.
Definitely feel like I've grown to like it a lot more. Like I've not that I disliked it. I just never really had an interest in it due to the men's game, obviously. But like for myself, like watching Arsenal women, especially like your likes of Beth Mead and things like that. Watching them play for England as well, it sort of gives you an interest in what they're doing as well, especially within title races and stuff against the likes of Manchester City and Chelsea. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, the international games really pushed it forward, especially with what happened with the Lionesses in the Euros and in the World Cup as well, with all like the competitiveness of it. It's different to the men's game, but in certain aspects it can be more enjoyable with like. They're not as like, there's less impact on diving and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what Connor said there is basically the same as for me as well. Never followed it too much, but obviously, I mean, we've got United as well. You've had them pumping money into the women's team as well. A lot of them are pushing it more on social media. I mean, I've got some stuff down here as well. As I mentioned, we're working with Chester. They, as of last season, the women's team have all been playing at the men's stadium now. More publicity for them, better. They were only founded in 2015, so still relatively new. WSL itself founded in 2010, and I mean now like we're watching the men's games, so you've got broadcasters, adverts. There's big women's games. Sky have got way more rights. TNT as well, haven't they? And then Ryan, I think what you said as well about the Lionesses, that was a big one. They won the Euros, didn't they? It's against Germany, and then got to the final. I mean, they've had loads of publicity because they've ultimately done something which the men haven't done yet, have they, in terms of winning a trophy? So, I mean, that was massive for them, wasn't it?
I think a big example as well is like, especially when you go to football grounds these days as well, is there's a lot of advertisement for the women's game on the billboards, things like that, which you probably didn't see 5-6 years ago.
Sure,
Perfect example, I was at Wembley, England versus USA, which is at Wembley this weekend, which is the return of the former England manager. So that gives it a little bit more of a taste to it as well. So yeah, it's pretty good it's really good to see like that diversity being there, so it makes a big difference.
Yeah, because they've always had bits. There's always been criticism as well from fans, isn't there? I think that's another aspect of it. I mean, I think people get annoyed when they try and compare it or bring it into the men's game, don't they? But I think you have got to look at it almost like it's its own thing. It's its own separate thing, and you can't compare it to the men's game because there just isn't going to be as much interest. But yeah, it's growing for sure massively. I mean, look at the numbers as well. Some of the top stadiums are filling out now, aren't they? With the women's, with fans and stuff.
And the broadcast numbers as well. Like for these big games, they are rivaling the men's certain men's games as well. Especially for the international football, especially.
Yeah, there's massive interest. There's becoming more and more interest. I mean, it's something that'll take a while as well to filter down over like the next few decades. But you see them pushing for girls to get more into it now as well. I mean, I've seen interviews. Jill Scott's a big one, I think, because she does a lot of media now, doesn't she? But I've seen her talking about it and stuff. Even just in her career, did she retire? Was it last year or the year before?
Year before.
Recently.
Just after the Euros, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was after.
Yeah, it was something like that. But I've seen her talking before about how different the game's developed even through her career. So when she was playing, starting out like 15 years ago, whenever it was, compared to how much, how different it was when she retired only 2 years ago or whatever.
And then think about how big it is going to be in 20 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a growing sport.
It's like, especially for like this weekend, especially with the England, like the Premier League being on international break, it meant all the women for the first time ever got their home games based at Premier League stadiums. So for example, North London Derby was at White Hart Lane. I'm pretty sure they played at the Etihad, Manchester City against Tottenham. But it's really good to see them using the absolute pinnacle of stadiums, do you know?
Yeah, that's massive. I mean, I was going to ask you boys. I went to see United women. It would have been I think about a year and a half ago now. It was about a year and a half ago. And it was really good, to be fair. Like the tickets were so much cheaper. Obviously, being United, it's so tough to get tickets for, but it's way cheaper, decent. The stadium was pretty full, to be fair, as well. And I thought it was decent, to be fair. They won 5-0 against Villa. Have any of you guys been to any of the women's game, or would you at all?
I haven't myself, but my cousin is a season ticket holder at Arsenal Women, so she goes to the Boreham Wood games and the Emirates quite a lot when they're playing. But I would really like to go to an England women's game at Wembley. I feel they attract big numbers, and it gives just gives a different feel to it. Like, they've got world class players, like you got your Laura Hemps, Alessia Russo's, Beth Meads, and Lucy Bronze and things like that. So it's a big opportunity to see some world class women players.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned Russo there. She was a big one for me as well, just in terms of learning more about it. I remember her, all that social media stuff about her. I think it was Arsenal were interested in signing her in the January, and they were throwing world record bids. She ended up not going in the January and moving on in the summer on a free, but that was a massive one because she's one of the biggest players in the league, going from United to Arsenal, whether that's in a men's or women's game. There's two massive clubs, and it's a massive move, and I think stuff like that brings massive interest to the sport as well, for sure. In terms of Chester, because I mentioned them earlier slightly, and we are working with them a bit this season. I thought I'd tie in a bit with them more specifically. I did mention that they, as a club, were founded in 2015, so still very, very new, taking big steps forward, finished third last season, and they're working closely with the men's club, so they now play, as I think I mentioned this, they played all their games from last season at the Diva as well. They've got 4 games in hand this season, boys. What's the hope for them? Obviously to go, but it's going to be tough, isn't it? Do you think they can do it this year?
I think it's a bit out of reach. I think what they've got to try and do is solidify maybe another top 3 position like they did last year, and just work on that consistency, and maybe go for it next year. Maybe get a couple signings and a couple of new youth players come in, because I think the first position are 20 points clear, which I think that's just a little out of reach.
Yeah, it could possibly be. It's tough with only one going up, I suppose, isn't it? But even so, like you said, it's just a process of building the club, isn't it? Like I said, still relatively early days for the women's team, and they're working with a club that attendances are great for both of them as well. So that's the main thing. They just want to keep building, and the plan is to try and get. They've got loads of games in hand as well, so that's the biggest thing. But I think that ties everything up for today's episode, boys. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.